Today, we're reimagining Sons of Anarchy through the lens of this question. What if SAMCRO took place within an urban fantasy?
The Belated Binge Podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Belated Binge. I'm Zach, former radio host and lifelong sports fan, discovering the magic of urban fantasy. Today, we're doing something kind of new on the show. And by kind of new, I mean incredibly new, never been done before, and I'm excited about it, but also this could go in a ton of different ways. If you've been here, you know how much I love the Sons of Anarchy TV show. I've even done episode recaps and some topic episodes on my podcast before. And while there's been interest in that content, some of those episodes are actually my most downloaded and on the audio players and also have the most views on YouTube. There was a bit of a challenge for me in a couple of areas with that content, most notably thematically. My podcast was sort of all over the place for a little while, and I was, for lack of a better way to put it, losing the plot. I started off only talking about Harry Potter for 2 years, and then tried to branch out from there, and quite frankly, although I thought about it painstakingly at the time, in retrospect, I should have considered some of my own concerns a bit more heavily because some of them definitely did come to fruition. One of them being adding TV shows to a podcast about a book series, which caused me some problems in my show category, getting the show in front of the right people to actually see it and actually want to listen to it. Another was a complete lack of audience overlap between Harry Potter and Sons of Anarchy fans. I was starting to get in front of a very fractured community, I guess you could say, and it was very difficult to essentially engage with, kind of be everything for everyone. And I couldn't do all the things for all the people. And I think I probably lost as many or more listeners than what I gained because they were only interested in one series I was talking about, and instead of getting one every week, now they got one every 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks on the topic they actually cared about. And then you add in the hiatus that I took for personal reasons, because I can't seem to talk. I was sort of starting from scratch, and I had to reevaluate what the show was going to be when I came back and try to do it in a way that really filled up my creative cup, if you will. And that's where discovering urban fantasy was born as a theme, which allowed me to keep talking about Harry Potter as I had for years already, but also expand beyond that into several other series that I've really, really enjoyed and like to talk about, but that all still fit within the same urban fantasy genre. However, that meant cutting ties or cutting my losses with some of the shows that I had done before, at least for now. But The Office was a bit of a dud. I found that doing a solo podcast that aims to be kind of, sarcastic, maybe bring some witty humor to the table, to a show that was written to be sarcastic with witty humor and cringy humor, there wasn't a whole lot for me to say aside from hey, remember that part of the episode? That was funny. And based on the download numbers from those episodes, you all agreed, so not a huge loss with The Office. Then Breaking Bad is what I brought in to replace The Office as a test, and I thought that would have at least more audience overlap with Sons of Anarchy, because they're both in that sort of, criminal underworld, anti-hero vein. And it was also possible that some of the Harry Potter audience would also enjoy that because Breaking Bad was just so insanely mainstream popular as well. So I thought maybe that one had some legs, and there was the added wrinkle that it was also a show that I'd never seen before. And so that was my first reaction to it. Well, that turned out to not be very great because I wasn't really enjoying the show. And the process of stopping the episode every couple of minutes to write down notes about what my reaction was, not a great way to consume it either. So honestly, not super sad to see that one go either. But that leaves Sons of Anarchy, which I absolutely love as a TV show. I've got a Harley in my garage. My closet is nothing but sports team t-shirts and Harley shirts. In case you're wondering, no, I don't wear pants. Ever. And while I have had some challenges in doing the work on that particular show, same concept, watching a show, but then like stopping it so periodically to write down the thoughts that you have and the points that you want to make and outline the episode for you. It's a little clunky and can get tiring at times, but I'm having a harder time let that one go, and a hard time also finding its place within the new theme. And I had this idea for a show for some of these episodes to be, and I thought, what better place to start than with Sons of Anarchy? So I first have to give credit to the podcast that inspired this idea. It's no longer active, unfortunately, but the podcast is called But Make It Scary. You can go listen to the evergreen episodes that are on there. They're just not currently churning out new ones that I'm aware of. And that I say unfortunately because I think it's a phenomenal podcast. The premise is simple. They take popular movies, typically in the romance or like rom-com genre, and then they rewrite the plot to turn them into a horror movie. And when I started thinking this through, like in this new urban fantasy theme that I was planning out, I was struck with the idea of doing something very, very similar, but instead of making popular things scary, we can turn them into urban fantasies, starting with Sons of Anarchy. And here's where things get experimental, because I've got a few different ideas of how this could be done and how it can be imagined. And so I thought this episode we'd just start with like a character exercise. So today we're going to make Sons of Anarchy an urban fantasy by taking the main characters and choosing a supernatural being or creature that closely matches their character from the show. And I should probably tell you that almost all of my frame of reference for these creatures comes from the Dresden Files series, which I think is one of the coolest things about that series, is that it brings all these different supernatural things into one universe, and the rules all still make sense. So you may think of a completely different creature from fantasy lore for these characters that I've maybe never even heard of. But hey, that's what makes this thing fun. I also posted a short version of this on social media at Belated Binge. If you're not already following me, you should be. I post a lot of shorts, and some of those video topics are exclusive to social, so give it a follow. We are going to start with the primary main character on the show. Obviously, it's Jax Teller. And for Jax Teller, I am thinking his supernatural crossover would be a vampire, but like the succubus kind. Jax is the definition of sex appeal in this show. If you post about Sons of Anarchy on social media, to this day, you are bound to have at least one woman in the comments section claiming him as their husband or complimenting him as if he's the one that's actually making the post. Seriously, it's sometimes alarming. So for me, I immediately thought vampire, but not the kind that's like creepy brute force and bat-like, but the ones that are like incredibly attractive, whether that's a mask over their true like monstrous form, or if they're just like human-like enough naturally that they look super hot, but also are super dangerous, using the art of seduction to get what they want. And I think that Jax Teller does this on the show, and it's super heavy in the first season where he literally like sleeps with a crow reader in exchange for her sleeping with Skeeter for the favor that they need from him in the morgue. I also think that he turns on the charm several times throughout the show when he needs to get someone, especially a female character, on his side for pretty much any reason, even if he's not actually doing the do, he's making them comfortable in good ways and in bad ones. Think about how he plays Wendy to go to rehab, and the whole time he's also with Tara, and how he gets into her apartment to blast her with that speedball. Think about how he got Susie to tag along to Nevada, how he got Agent Stahl even to cut a deal with him in the club, how he was with Trinity, who ended up being his half sister, how he worked with Luann and with Ima, and even how he worked with Lila. Hell, even Venus. Like, he had a way with these women regardless of his motives, and he knew how to use it. Almost like it was a superpower, like a succubus. He was also ruthless, destructive, and capable of going on literal killing sprees, all while playing a manipulative long game inside of the chaos, like a vampire. The next character that we're going to do is Teller-Morrow. I initially thought that he was going to be a werewolf, and I could still kind of be pushed there, but I think there's something sympathetic to werewolves that is hard to assign to Clay, and I think that's going to come up a little bit more later. For now, I think Clay is pretty much just a selfish, destructive dude, and for that, I felt like a demon was more appropriate. Still super strong, but without the sympathy or the empathy. Nobody made him the way that he was. He just was. I know Opie and Jax both made the case at different points of the show that say that Clay is what the club made him, but I honestly don't buy that. Sure, he became what they made him as far as how much power he gained, how he wielded that power, the decisions he made, and ultimately how he craved that power along the way, but this was him long before he sat at the head of the table. Think about the Gemma storyline. Think about the Irish storyline with McGee. Think about the Piney storyline. This man was openly sleeping with his best friend's wife, who was conspiring to murder his best friend because he wanted, A, not just to keep sleeping with the man's wife, but also to actually take the man's wife, to be with her, to marry her, to claim her as his own old lady, his property, and B, because he wanted the club to sell guns and dive deeper into the dangerous side of their business model as opposed to getting out of it like JT wanted. For selfish greed. This man also was capable of murdering a fellow member of the First Nine for making a decision behind the club's back for money. He pushed him off a roof. No vote, no democracy, just a choice made to murder him for his greedy choice. Then turn around and make a deal with a cartel behind the club's back for money and for greed, putting the whole club in danger for it. This man was capable of murdering another member, Piney, the man who brought him into the club in the first place, to hide his secret of killing JT from the club. Any man who is capable of all of these things, these selfish choices, is not a victim of anything. He's just a demon. So for Clay's right-hand man, Tig Trager, I don't think this needs a ton of explanation, to be honest. He is a ghoul. Ghouls are pretty messed up. And Tig is pretty messed up. And if there's a better supernatural creature to explain Tig's level of messed up, I've simply never heard of it. This dude is a killer, but not just a killer. He's a dirty work killer among killers. He's also a character that not only admitted to, but volunteered the information of sharing his pleasure from having sexual encounters with dead bodies. So, given that ghouls feed on the corpses and prey on the living, it's not that much of a leap to get to Tig. Not to mention, the picture I found of a ghoul actually kind of looks like him. And that'll make the most sense for the video audience. Now we're going to do Gemma, who I've got as a Winter Fae queen. The Fae are deceptive, manipulative, and the Winter Court is depicted as being the ones that are ruthless, violent. That's Gemma. Ruthlessly manipulative of everyone in her orbit, regardless of who they are. She manipulated multiple romantic partners, conspired to kill a couple of those romantic partners. She manipulated her own son. And if she could do that, the other club members? Yeah, the women, the families that are tied to those other club members, they had absolutely no chance whatsoever to avoid Gemma's wrath. One scene in particular stands out when she was mad at Nero's business partner, maybe half sister or something, if I'm remembering that right. And instead of doing something about it herself directly, she found Tara, who was angry, and manipulated her into starting a fight with Nero's partner. While she had a broken arm, she beat the woman's head in with her cast. This show is not for children. I believe that it was on Reaper Reviews that I first heard the phrase, Jax is the sun, Gemma is the anarchy. And that's exactly what I think of when I think about the Winter Fae. Manipulative, organized anarchy, which is kind of a juxtaposition, I suppose, but still feels very fitting. She's also doing it from a place of power within the relationship structure that they have. In this outlaw world, she holds power over all the women as the top old lady. She holds power over the club as their pseudo mother figure. She holds power over the leadership of the club as well because she's the wife of or the mother of the guys who run said club. In short, she's the queen. Queen Gemma of the Winter Fae. So then, if that's Gemma, if we look at Tara, Tara is the literal opposite of Gemma, but groomed to sort of become her heir apparent. And that's why I've got her as a summer fae, because she's coming at it from the opposite motivation as Gemma, where Gemma claimed that she did everything for her family. She did it from a selfish motivation of keeping control over her family because she had her plan of what was best for them and she was going to force them to follow it because it's what she wanted. Tara came from a selfless motivation. She wanted to save her family, protect them. And where Gemma was ruthless, Tara was desperate. And even just in her actual career outside of the club, she was a surgeon. But not just a surgeon who specialized in saving babies. In the club, she saved them from bullet wounds, dog bites, knives, bombs, crashes. Yeah, you get it. She was a healer. And when I think healer in a supernatural, like urban fantasy setting, I think Summer Fae. The last character we're going to do today is Opie. And Opie is the reason that I realized that Clay was not a werewolf. Because Opie is. While werewolves are ridiculously strong and capable of being incredibly violent, generally speaking, their condition wasn't their choice. In a lot of werewolf lore, they're bitten and turned, making them actually a victim. Clay is definitely not a victim, but Opie is. Opie is one of the most tragic characters in the entire Sons of Anarchy show. He starts off having already gone to prison for the club, losing time with his wife, and his children and making it difficult for them to adjust to just having him around suddenly. And then he basically loses them to the club when he gets back in order to try to get them out of the massive amount of debt that they compiled while he was locked up for the club. Then he literally loses his wife when Tig, the ghoul, kills her, thinking she's Opie himself. Then he loses his father when Clay kills him. And along the way, he loses himself, distancing himself from his children, distancing himself from his best friend, splitting from his second wife, Lila, who was always just an attempt for Opie to find himself again in the first place, and ultimately sacrificing himself for his best friend and for the club. He's the ultimate SAMCRO victim. Ruthless, yes. Violent, yes. But he could have been different. He could have been better if he hadn't kept losing everything he loved, like werewolves do when they're bitten. What do you think? Was this fun? Do you have ideas for more characters for Sons of Anarchy? What other shows, movies might this be a fun exercise to do? Let me know in the comments, and subscribe on YouTube if you never want to miss an episode. And if you're listening on a podcast app, please rate this 5 stars. Don't forget about Patreon, where you can get bonus content and other cool perks too. Patreon.com/Belated Binge. And as always, thanks for hanging out with me on this episode of Belated Binge.